everyone, and welcome to our 2 o'clock session today on building and maintaining remote student relationships. We have on our panel today Robert Hunt, Jill Kelly, and Elena Borzova, and they're here to talk to us about how they've been working on maintaining remote relationships in the setting that we've found ourselves in now. My name is Jennifer Culver, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. If you have any questions as the panelists are talking, please feel free to type those questions into the Q&A area down at the bottom or in the chat, and I'll ask them from the presenters as we go. And with that, I'm going to take it away and ask our panelists, as you worked in remote instruction, and I know some of you have worked online previously, what are some ways that you know that you can start to kind of build in relationship building into a virtual course?
So I'm going to say, let me get started. I taught remotely when I was in grad school. We had online summer courses, and I'm coming with the experience that we all share of the spring. And one of the things that I intend to do that is going to be different, right? In the spring, we already had relationships with our students. And knew about them and a little bit about their lives and how they perform, and could run with that once we went remote. And that is not true of this semester. And so normally on the first day of class, I would ask everyone to introduce themselves, to share their majors, where they're from, what do they want to be when they grow up, and usually have them share a fun fact. I think I'm still going to do that this semester, but I'm going to start with like an online ungraded Canvas quiz, where I ask them questions, those same questions, about themselves, but perhaps 2 other questions directly designed to address this moment we're in, right? One, what do you want me to know about your extracurricular activities, right? So that I'm not asking them to share anything they don't want me to know, but to let me know about whether or not they're working or using childcare, or those kinds of things that can help me better gauge their performance and notice when they're less engaged, or to be more understanding and flexible as needed. But the second question that I really want to stress then is something fun or something unique about them that I might learn in normal times, hanging around before or after class, right? So that I can then kind of use those to help me address them, whether they are remote, or because I'm teaching high flex, right? So whether they are remote or in my classroom, right? Those fun facts that I can say, Joe, who loves the Pittsburgh Steelers, why don't you answer this question, right? To kind of personalize things and get them engaged and create a sense of community when we can't be in the room together.
I'm happy to jump in. I think the same thing, getting the engagement going at a personal level right off the bat is good. What I've used in the past, we've been doing hybrid for a couple of years, and it's a setting where you're going to come in and the first lecture is 5 hours. So you're off to a fast start, and there's a lot of material, and so it's good to get something going in advance. And what I've done is, I've done doodle polls. That's one way. You can use Canvas for polling as well, on anything, just to get them engaged with saying something about their attitude towards the course and what they bring to it or what's personal to them. Pre-class discussion forums, I've used that before. For all my classes now, I'm doing a sort of an introductory video I ask them to watch before the first day of class. And that's partially an introduce me, but it's also and what do you think? So my videos in the world religions class are short videos that I shot in Southeast Asia about the different religions while I was essentially on holiday with my kids. So they're both pertinent to the topic, but they are also personal, of my introduction personally to them and inviting a personal response. And I think all of those are good ways to get that engagement. It'll be interesting in the high flex classroom, and I like what Jill said about being able to start the first day of class with those students who are not in the classroom and engaging them on a personal level. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I also agree with Robert and Jill. And also what I do at the beginning of all my classes, I would ask them, how you doing? And then we talk a little bit for a few minutes. And also I introduce them to all these different options that we offer at SMU. Like, for example, I ask them, guys, do you like Zumba or do you like yoga? Do you know that you can take virtual classes? We can do it together, and then we'll actually meet over Zoom and do yoga together or Zumba together. And these are pre-recorded classes. So I also let them know about all these different opportunities that are available for all of us. And the majority of the students, they usually don't know about that. And that's why I think it's a great way to introduce that to our students. Usually I do it when I teach on campus or if I do it through Zoom as well. And I think it's also a great way to do something together with students and establish that certain relationship with students.
Yeah, if I can add, I like to think about this as that there are two sets of relationships that need to be established. One is a relationship with me. The other is their relationships with each other. And so if they can be responding to each other about things that they care about at an early phase in the class, it happens that regardless of what I'm teaching, I think there's something in pop music that's relevant or popular culture. So starting with the discussion of pop music and pop culture is often a way of getting them to interact with each other about something that they're engaged in. And because I teach grad students, I have a 20-year age range, maybe more than 20. I have grad students that are older than me. So it also begins to give me and them a hint of the range of our engagements with cultures, which can range from anything from my current student assistant who's 22 years old to somebody who's a grandmother. And that gets us started at a place where we all know that we're not all in the same place. And I'll move on to the next thing if someone wants to, which is, I think that's a great way to get started. Then I'm really interested in making sure that they stay engaged in online settings week by week. And when we taught hybrid courses, it was an intensive beginning, intensive end, and 14 weeks in between. And the 14 weeks were the killer weeks, because that's when students drop out if there's not constant engagement. So one of the several ways that I tried to make that work was I did at least a 5 to 8 minute video every week that I put up in Panopto that was really just me talking about the 3 most important things I think they should be learning in their material that week, and followed by a quiz. So I used Panopto to insert the quiz in the video. Now, there's other things I did, but that, at a very shortest way, that meant that by Friday, I could check the grade book and see if I'd lost anybody, that they hadn't done that quiz for that week. And it's pretty lightweight assignment. I mean, watch a 5 minute video or 8 minute video and answer 3 questions. But at the same time, it let me know that they're hanging in there and engaged, or maybe they're slipping off the edge and I need to do something.
One of the things I did to kind of, like Robert, gauge whether or not people were keeping up with us and the assignments in the spring was to do some polls where I allowed them to respond anonymously to say, are you keeping up with the readings? Especially in the spring when we were really first transitioning, I had offered some films as alternatives if students were struggling to read, right? So I would kind of poll them, are you keeping up with the readings? Would you prefer shorter? Are you doing okay, right? To kind of get some feedback and see where they were and to see how I could adjust to keep them engaged. I think there is a challenge that we're all going to face where we try to keep the students who are really doing well with with learning remotely versus those who are finding it more troubling, right? So trying to find the balance that we keep the ones who are, finding it easy to succeed, engaged and kind of constantly stimulated, and those who need a little bit of more attention or need a little less work to kind of remain engaged. And so that kind of constant checking in being polls where no one has to to our face say, I'm really struggling, please don't hold me accountable for that, right? Those kinds of informal anonymous pollings, so that I can keep abreast of where they are vis-a-vis where I want them to be.
And I can also add that I'm teaching engineering courses, so we usually have a discussion how to approach this certain solution, and then I use breakout rooms a lot. And I think students are more comfortable these days with using these rooms, and they usually request these rooms while I'm teaching. And I think it's a great tool that we have for us, that's available for us through Zoom.
Could you talk a little bit more about how all of you have used something like the breakout rooms to help the students feel more connected to each other? That was a great point that Robert mentioned earlier, the connection to you and the connection to each other. How can we use features like those breakout rooms?
Well, in my case, for example, I give them the quiz, and then I would tell them, guys, if you have any questions, I'm here for you, and the breakout room is available for you. And then they would tell me, oh, pick me, and then I will just let them use that breakout room. We will discuss some ideas and solutions or pictures that they have to use, like free body diagrams, and then they will feel more comfortable, so they will ask for more and more. So that's why I can be connected with all my students, and I know that, oh, now I can move on with that subject. Oh, I have to stay longer, and we have to discuss that in more details.
Yeah. Well, I've used breakout rooms more with some classes that I'm teaching outside the SMU context than SMU, partially because I typically have small enough classes that a breakout room isn't necessary. But I have to say, it's a super effective way to both break up a lecture and content and have the students talk to each other for a while, sort out some of their own problems, and maybe come back with, look, the 6 of us in this breakout room just couldn't, we couldn't figure it out. So maybe it's time to get something more. It is interesting that the students often, when we use this a lot more, which is to say the second half of last semester, the students wanted to kind of be in the same breakout room over and over till they were working on things with each other. So they liked this same 6 people talking to each other because they had a kind of dynamic. That's in a class that had 30 people. There's probably some mix that I haven't discovered yet of mixing them up, but also letting them gain some familiarity with each other. But Zoom allows you to rather easily set that up. And so I think that's, I'll be using that a lot more this semester, especially with HighFlex, by the way. So if I can say one thing about that, I don't know what the university's policy is going to be on this, but at the theology school, we're going to be asking that every student, whether they're in the classroom or outside of the classroom, be in the Zoom meeting. And that's going to let us set up breakout discussion groups that cross over between the in-classroom group and the out-classroom group. And now, believe me, that could be a total train wreck, but we think it's probably going to work pretty well. And so you can check back with me on that particular experiment. But every one of my students brings a laptop to class anyway. So why not have them say, okay, join the Zoom meeting. And this way the discussion doesn't have to be broken up between the Zoom meeting people and the in-class meeting. And you can maintain social distancing in the classroom that way. Your breakout room can include 2 people on the opposite sides of the room.
And I think one of the important things that I try to do with the breakaway rooms is have them not only speak to one another in those groups, but then to have someone appointed as the report back person, so that after they've been in their breakout groups, they can then share their findings with the other breakout groups. And so, by designating someone to be that person, you're also then encouraging engagement outside of those circles.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that we can't forget too is that some of our students are going to be in different time zones, particularly some of our international students. And so one of the things that we need to think about is kind of establishing those contacts early and figuring out who they are and what time zone they're on, to see if there are moments in a day where you might be able to connect them to one another, or you have an earlier morning or kind of later evening meeting with them to try to facilitate the connections that will be a little harder when they're on the other side of the globe.
Yeah, I want to ask a question if I can, Elena, which is because I think you probably do more of this kind of work than we've typically done. Do you use group work, group assignments to also form these bonds? No. Okay. I'm just wondering, we're going to be doing that in one class I'm teaching. The major grade will actually come from them working in some small groups towards a project. And we divided it in ways to make sure it's fair to individuals. But that again is kind of an experiment to see if by working together on something where they will have their experience to bring because they're all working professionals. Yeah. If it will not also bring some of that community that we're hoping for between them.
And Dave,
but we do it in our, we do it in our design courses. But since I don't teach design courses, that's why I need the individual assignments, and I need to see that every single person knows how to move on with that certain concept.
Okay.
So that's why I don't do the group assignments, because otherwise it's going to be quite challenging for them to solve these different problems later during the exams.
Yeah.
And Dave from Cox has said that they've been testing having the laptops, all the laptops in the room and everybody joining Zoom, and said that if the in-class students are going to join Zoom, you'll want them to have headphones.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a must. Yeah.
For sound reasons, and that they've been testing it. We did get a question, though, from the participants. Have any of you tried incentives like grades or points to increase engagement? And if so, what worked and what didn't?
I'll say, I was about to type an answer to that, but I'll say what I found worked was I make each of these quizzes worth about 5 points. And depending on how the whole grading is, what that often means is that for the weakest students, this can be an important way to get them on towards a passing grade, towards C+ or B-, if they stay engaged. And I think that does incentivize them, even though the amounts of points per quiz are very low and they could fail them out of it, but I've found that incentivizes them. That's the best thing I've found so far. But yeah, maybe others have other experiences.
So in the history department, we tend to, by nature, have discussion to be a major part of our grading. And so in this moment of SMU Flex and remote learning, we are adjusting those expectations to recognize that all of our learners are coming from different places, right? And so we've been trying to build in, participation is still incentivized in that it's part of the grade, but we have many more ways in which you can participate so that no one is penalized if they're having tech issues or if they are asynchronous or anything else that might make it more difficult for them to be present and fully engaged, right? So I normally would circulate a couple of discussion questions to help readers focus as they address a text, right? And so in this moment, their participation can come not only from speaking, via Zoom or in the classroom, but they can also, submit their responses to those for participation points, right? So that they engage in written form if they're unable to do so in real time.
Yeah. I have to say that's one of the things that we've had students only over about 3 time zones, but we'll now have people who are 8 hours off. I'll have at least 2 students that are 8 hours off in Africa. And one who's 13 hours off in Asia. Well, 13 is going to be, I lived in Asia and I still work with people in Asia all the time. And, a 13-hour time difference is not easy to negotiate. But I think we'll be able to do it. I'll just mention another problem and opportunity. The problem is one course I'm doing is fully online as opposed to the flex courses I'm teaching. And SMU has asked that fully online courses still be 30% synchronous, but they didn't assign a time for my course. So I don't know when we're going to do it synchronously. But that said, that's another kind of asynchronicity, is when you don't have all your students even capable of being in the same place at the same time. And what I've done with the hybrid courses on this, because the students don't plan in the 14 weeks of online to be in class at a particular time, is I set up, depending on the size of the class, I set up 5 or 6 Zoom discussion groups for 5 or 6 students. And they're just a half hour. It's basically a check-in, ask a question if you're not getting the reading and stuff like this. But again, the students tended to fall into always being in the same group with each other. And some of them were doing this from their car phone, waiting to pick up a child. Of course, towards this time, the end of the semester, they were all at home. But when I polled the students at the end of the course, they all highly valued the small Zoom discussion groups. And the overall time wasn't that huge for me, right? Because I really did keep them to half an hour. I said, we're all busy people, but let's check in, make sure we don't have any questions from this week. I recorded those, by the way, on Zoom and put them up. So if there was a good question asked in one, the others could see it if they wanted to. But it really kept the students engaged, and they expressed a high appreciation for that. Of course, the other thing is Zoom office hours. Now, maybe others have other experiences, but what I did for Zoom office hours was I announced my office hours. At the beginning of office hours, I turned on Zoom. I set them where I have to let the participant in. I turned on Zoom. I turned off the video, I muted the microphone, and I waited for someone to show up. I just did my work, and if they, in a sense, virtually knocked on my door. And I got a few people, 1 or 2 a week, not that many. Most of them preferred the set time Zoom discussion groups with their peers.
I'm also planning to incorporate kind of small 10, 15-minute chunks of times in classes across the semester around assignments. Because I'm thinking about all of the kind of informal things that would happen before and after classes, right? As students talk to each other, like, hey, have you started your paper? Where did you find sources? I'm going to try to, in the weeks before a particular assignment, work this kind of 10-minute session in where we put them in Zoom groups and allow them to talk about their projects, right? And because those are the kinds of things that they'll lack when we're remote or high flex and, kind of rushing to get in and out of the classroom safely. And I'm hoping that by being able to kind of duck into those across the weeks, that I can also help them in this kind of more, what I think Sherry Kunovich's office is calling it structured flexibility, right? Where we're putting some flexible moments into our schedules. We're structuring these flexible times to allow them to get the help that they might not be ready to schedule a meeting for or to pop into an office hours, but do want to ask questions about.
And I also wanted to add that since I'm teaching engineering courses and I need to see the exact solution to these different problems, usually I give them quizzes, and that's why they have to submit it. But my policy is that they will get 5 points if they just submit their first name and last name, and then 10 points if the solution is correct. And in our Lyle School of Engineering, we've been offering online courses for more than 20 years. And I've been teaching these courses for more than 20 years. And I had students from all these different parts of US and sometimes outside of US. And I've noticed that usually when I give them a certain assignment and they will send me back the solution, and then I will correct the solution and send it back to the student, they really appreciate that connection that we can establish. And then the student will appreciate that I can check and grade everything for that certain student. So they will see that certain bond that we would establish. Yeah. And it's interesting that sometimes they would stop by my office like in a couple of years just to see me in person after all these years that we've been together through the online instructions.
Yeah. I love the idea of some credit for just showing up. A variation on that for the and this, it's a little bit different situation, the topics I teach, than it would be for engineering, which is essentially I set the quizzes in Panopto so they can take them till they get the answers right. And I basically say, because the point here is not to evaluate whether you're good or bad. The point here is that you learned it. So if you took the quiz 5 times and you finally got the answers right, I figure you'll remember now.
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
You know, and by the way, then it's a huge heads up if you find a student who blows through the quiz and doesn't bother to wait till they get the answers right. In other words, they know the answer's wrong and they still move to the next question and take a 3 out of 5 on the quiz. Then to me, that's a huge red flag that somebody's in a hurry, someone's really having trouble getting engaged in the course.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
You all kind of touched on this just a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more outside, how do you use some of the other tools available to you to help the students stay connected to you and each other outside of Zoom? How do you use Canvas or other tools to help students stay connected?
I would say for me, Zoom is my primary tool because I'm also an undergraduate advisor in our mechanical engineering department. So I advise more than 100 students, and I prefer to do everything through Zoom so we can see each other. And that's another way for me to establish the relationship with students. Sometimes they will show me their cats, dogs, and something they would like to share. And then they will be more comfortable coming back and asking more questions, not just regarding the courses, but advising as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I did really beginning 2 semesters ago, as the capacity to do this became greater for everybody, is, and I do this even in classes that are face-to-face classes, it's becoming so, using video as a language by which we communicate is becoming so ubiquitous that I encourage students now using a Canvas discussion forum, because Canvas will support this, to share videos with each other that they make. So instead of just typing it in, make a 2-minute video and explain why this particular pop song told you something about the human condition. And a lot of that is not because it's the only way to do it. It's because we need to learn to communicate with each other in that relatively rich environment. Now, I'm going to be honest. I desperately want to go beyond that. If it weren't a time that it's difficult enough to organize things with students, I'm all ready to set up the virtual 360 room using Oculus Go goggles and have us all meet there for class. I've experimented with it a good deal myself. I think it would be utterly fabulous. And I think we could do a lot with just what's off the shelf. But we're not quite at the place where we can tell students to go buy the Oculus Go goggles. And by the way, they're discontinuing them so they can sell their next higher brand. But still, the time will come when we will teach in virtual classrooms with avatars. I have no doubt about it. And I think that will really allow us to do some things that I'll tell you the 2 things I think are most important. One is every semester I have special needs students for whom it's a huge problem to come into the physical classroom. It's a massive hill they have to climb. And if we can find the most inclusive way to get students with disabilities totally engaged in the group, then doing that I think is huge. And Zoom is a tool for that, but it's not the best tool for that. I know some of our classrooms are going to have this OWL 360 video conferencing camera. Because I had a little money, I purchased another kind of one of those called Cantao, which is a 360. It's a video. It's like OWL. It just costs a little bit less. I've been experimenting with it, so my students are going to bear the brunt of that experimentation. But again, that allows a student who's outside to have a more real experience of being in the classroom through Zoom. So I'm not saying I've done all this. I've begun to experiment with it. I think there's huge potential for it. And when we have the moment in the class to be out on the edge with the students a little bit, that's where I'm going to be going beyond Zoom.
I'm also planning to share YouTube playlists. Typically, a part of teaching African history for me is opening class with contemporary music or some of the classics to kind of introduce students to the fullness of African lives and experiences, not just the historical content that we're grappling with in the course. And so normally I would just play a song before class, and to the extent that that'll be possible, as we're disinfecting our high flex classrooms and stuff, I'll have that running. But I'm now kind of crafting for dissemination the playlists and the kind of movie recommendations that are currently on Netflix or Hulu or YouTube, to kind of give students these other kind of insights into kind of contemporary African life that we might not cover in the classroom, but might also make them more interested in understanding the history of X Place, because they really liked this Queen Sono on Netflix.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I also would like to add that I'm using some videos and YouTube videos. Since I'm originally from Russia, every time when we talk about certain equation, I tell them about the history, Russian history, and students can learn about these different subjects, and I can see that definitely it makes less boring of an instructor and of a lecture when we're not just looking at the equations, but we're also talking about something else and then coming back to the equations through these videos and I don't know, big red stars that I'm using in my notes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Elena, because I think that the more in which we bring something new from ourselves into the classroom, the more that it creates engagement. And I'll be honest, it helps us pitch SMU as a place that you're having a special experience.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean? This is not plain vanilla. I do want to say one thing, since I brought up the 360 virtual reality, the Simmons School, and Jennifer, I know you can say a great deal more about this, is already using blended reality simulations for education. I've been sitting in on some of those, watching how that works. It's not going to be something that's appropriate for every single thing that happens, but this is something that SMU is well set up with the capacity to do right now. And I'm looking at it for 6 months out from now, because there's obviously setup time and there's some costs involved as well. But I'd like for all of us to be thinking about how we can use some of those kinds of tools when they are appropriate for what we're teaching. I saw some interesting things over at Simmons on shared mixed reality experiments where people in 3 different continents can actually manipulate the same things together. You all may be aware that Microsoft, I mean, this would be a fun project. I just wish I could think of which one to do with my students. But Microsoft makes a version of Minecraft where with just a cell phone, people who are in different rooms can operate on the same building, virtual building together. Well, I think that would be cool. I just don't teach in the right school for that. So I've got, but
well, I don't do Minecraft, but the students inform me that they have set up an SMU Minecraft. So apparently if you play, you can log in and place yourself at SMU. And so for those who do know this and use it, I suspect there are probably some really creative things we could do where we put ourselves virtually in Minecraft on SMU's campus.
Okay, so definitely something to explore, because I think in terms of student engagement, all of this kind of what is typically called gaming, and SMU's got a terrific school with the Guildhall and Gary. All of that kind of thing to me really gives an opportunity to create student-to-student engagement in some new ways, especially younger students who are coming much more than I am from a world of those shared virtual reality gaming worlds. And I think that's something to totally explore. My younger students are totally into it. It's a little bit harder when I get the older students. They're still YouTube, but eventually everybody will be on.
Peter has a question. Could you estimate the percentage of lecture, audio visuals, focused discussion, and freestyle talk in an average class?
Go for it, Jill.
No, no I'm not sure there is an average. And I think this is one of the things I've been trying to think about a lot this semester, because with our in-time classes being shortened by 5 minutes to allow students on campus to move in between classrooms, I've been trying to think about how I can allow more time for flexibility and allow more time for me to ask more often than I normally would. Is everyone with me? And so, I mean, typically I teach on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And so typically I do kind of lecture and Q&A on Monday and Wednesday, and Fridays are devoted to discussion sessions. But one of the things I'm trying to be conscious about as I prepare for this semester is allowing a lot more time for the Q&A in the normal kind of lecture sessions, just because it's going to be harder for us to see their faces and know how they're doing. And so I've been trying to kind of, as I think about my lectures and refer to my notes, inserting more time where I say, okay, how is everyone doing? Does someone want to sum that up for me, right? So that I make sure that they're repeating it and processing it. And so that is something that I'm trying to build in, is more flexible time. But I don't think there's an average, especially because, I might think I'm going to cover X material in a session, and then I only get through half of it. And so it's, kind of depends on the day and the level of engagement.
For this semester, I think of myself as pretty good about stopping and engaging in discussion and things like this. And I rarely have material I feel like I must absolutely follow in class. I'm usually comfortable if the class ends at the wrong place, saying and read chapter 2, because next week we're going to pretend as if I finished last lecture, or check the PowerPoints online, which I always put online. But especially this semester, where at any moment I figure we could all of a sudden end up being all online, I've really prepared Canvas and the material on the assumption that lectures could stop at any moment. And so what I've done with my PowerPoints, which are what lead me through my lectures, is between every 12 and 15 minutes, it just pops up with a class discussion, break into discussion groups. As entertaining as I think I am as a lecturer, I think I'm not as entertaining on Zoom. And I'm guessing that that 12 to 15 minutes is max before they need a break from me, and I need a break too. So I'm sort of doing it that way. But that's experimental, and I'll say too, I think each of us has to figure out what our style is. As a lecturer, you have to know when you're on a roll, and when you've got everybody's eyeballs on you and you're making progress and you don't want to stop now because you need to get to the place you need to get to. What's more difficult is knowing when you're not on a roll and it's time to take a break and come back at it from another angle. And that'll be our biggest challenge in terms of student engagement in the high flex system, or the SMU flex. I love that we've branded everything, including the virus. Is figuring out what the Zoom participants and how engaged they are is going to be tough. I think that's going to take, if there was anything to say about engaging students, it's going to be our antenna are just going to really have to be up for the Zoom participants that are not in the classroom with us, to see if we've still got them with us.
And I think it'll be more important than ever for us to, and I'm sure our administrators would say this every semester, but I think especially this semester, the kind of midterm reporting that gets asked of us, it's really going to be extra important that we look at those lists and make sure that those students who are on the list for a variety of reasons, scholarships and athletics, et cetera, to make sure that we're keeping an eye on them, because they are humans that the university is already asking us to keep an extra eye out in normal times, and in pandemic, in the pandemic moment, it'll be extra important that we do that.
I don't know what the university's results were, but in Perkins, we absolutely lost some students after March. They just, they weren't up for online, or they got busy, or, you know, we always have people with a family that are working professionals. It's really hard to keep them engaged. And as soon as that dropped off, a few dropped off. I didn't lose any, but I think it's because I already had a system in place where I was constantly in touch with them. And since retention is a huge, huge thing, then I think all of these methods of staying engaged are huge and important too. Especially because none of us, well, not none of us, Elena, everybody you do has, they know they're online, right? They know the deal. But for many of us, we're not dealing with students for whom this was the deal, neither HighFlex nor online. And so it's going to take more work to make sure that they feel like they're engaged and in the subject, and we're going to have to put it out for them.
Yeah, and that's why, for example, in our department, we usually ask all our students if they're online to switch to the video mode so we can see their faces, and sometimes they don't want to do it, especially if it's a morning class, and then we'll get some critique that, oh, I don't look good in the morning. Why did you force me to turn on the video? But we just want to make sure that students are with us while we're talking about something.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the university is encouraging that, you know, but we also know we have to be sensitive that there are reasons why students don't want to do it other than they don't look good in the morning, right? And that we do not know their home situations and their technology capacities. And so I think that the provost office is trying to kind of come up with some resources that we can encourage that, you know, by teaching the students how they can use professional or appropriate backgrounds and things to allow them to be present without sharing too much of their personal life that they might want to keep very closely. And so it is a sensitive balance of wanting to see them and wanting to engage with them in that way, but also respecting that there could be some things going on that they don't want to share with everyone else who can see them on the screen.
Yeah. If they tell me they're having a bad hair day, I say, I'm always having a bad hair day. I can't even find it. But I just, what Jill said about background, I think is hugely important. It's as important in the graduate schools as I think undergraduates, which is that I try to alert my students to the fact that since Zoom meetings are going to be part of our future, that it's unlikely that in a professional environment you're going to want to appear in a Jedi fighter. Now that's fine for class, right? But you do need to be thinking about not only the foreground of what I'm seeing of your face, but what you're using as a virtual background to hide the rest of your life from me. I don't mind you hiding it from me, fine. But I don't always want my home office to be seen either. But I think that's something where we can help our students in a small way to begin to make the move to a set of adult and professional interactions, which is the way they're going. You know, it's like giving the sugar bear at Hotmail email address up for Bob at SMU. You're not going to want the sugar bear at Hotmail when you apply for your first job. Neither do you want you in the TIE fighter on that Zoom meeting with HR.
And I should say, some of our history majors were really creative in the spring. They would show up to class with the Battle of Hastings behind them.
Oh, there you go.
And so that may actually be another way of thinking, you know, and I say this, my university laptop does not have the capacity for me to use a background without a green screen, right? And so that is, we can't ask that of all of our students, right? But it could be one assignment or one extra credit amongst other to come to class with an appropriate background for the topic of what we're instructing. Some of my colleagues elsewhere are using memes where they're asking the students to produce memes because we are remote and the kind of digital world often speaks in meme is to ask the students a question and that they have to answer through the use of making a meme online. And so I think that as we really try to keep students engaged, there are some fun ways that we can try to do that.
I love that. I'm writing this down because this will work perfectly for one of my classes. It's perfect.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else, just kind of as a last topic or idea to throw out, that as you're thinking about the students that are coming to you in the fall and some ways to build and maintain those relationships, what's one thing that you want to make sure that you do?
I think the main thing I'm looking at is weekly follow-up with them. I don't think it's very hard. And by the way, that's I don't usually live in Canvas like some people do, but I've found that emails to the entire body of students with anything are not as effective as just taking the time to shoot everybody individually an email saying, by the way, how's it going? Saw you did well on the quiz, or saw you haven't taken the quiz. Some people answer, some people don't, but I think that knocking on the door every week of every individual is not very time consuming. And you might knock on a door where there's one of the students who's really in trouble and they're happy you reached out to them, that they can get back to you and say, well, as a matter of fact, I need to talk about this.
Yeah, I do. I think one of my commitments is to really make sure that the remote students don't feel they're getting less attention. And to some extent, it'll be easier in the SME Flex when students are in front of you, switching off every other week. But some of the questions that the provost office is getting from students is like, are we going to be fully engaged? And so I think that it's going to require, and this is a lot to ask of us, because the pandemic moment is stressful for all of us. But to kind of really make that extra effort to reach out to the remote students so that they know I know who they are, and that they can pop into office hours or schedule anything. It is going to require a little extra time, like Robert said, maybe not so much, but it is more work than we would normally do, but I think it is really necessary, especially when we think about some of the people who are opting to be remote for various vulnerable reasons, that it's really important that we acknowledge that and reach out to them.
And I'm looking forward to see that all my students are not going to be afraid of asking questions, any types of questions from the course or about SMU or about something else. And I want them to be comfortable with that, remotely or in class.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for.
And I want to have more fun than usual, just because it is going to be harder for them, especially our fully remote students, to engage with their peers on campus and have some of the joys of being university students. And so kind of working in extra credits that allows them to do something a little bit more sillier than I might in other times, just to kind of give everybody some joy in stressful times.
Yeah.
Okay, I really want to thank our panelists for their time today and for their thoughts and for their great input and their great suggestions, and the thank yous are already coming in on the Q&A as well. As we kind of send off from this one, I think you've given us a lot of great ideas to think about, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Happy to be part of it. Yeah.
Happy to meet you all.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye.
Bye.
This webinar will start up the next session in just a few minutes. Thank you to the participants for coming. Thank you for your questions, and keep them coming.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great day.